I remember being on a table. The entity I remember is very, very tall. The face was exactly like a praying mantis. And it moved its head in very jerky-like manner. And I'm pretty sure, just in my own heart, that that's not the first time in 1965.
There's one being in particular that I always recognize, and he's not a gray. He's taller, he's thinner, he's got a bigger head, he's got bigger eyes. His limbs are very praying mantis-like. I remember being on the table with my head turned away, not wanting to look at this creature. And then when I looked at him, I just recognized him as the one that I hated. You find yourself on a table and these creatures around you with instruments, and you have no idea what they're doing, and they don't tell you.
My skin was sliced like with a surgical instrument.
When a person is abducted, it's a physical examination. The focus of the entire enterprise seems to me to be unmistakably on reproductive issues.
And I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I found myself in a room, and I was laying on a table, and I had 6 beings, and I couldn't tell you what they were doing because I really don't know. But I remember the one that was on the left of my head took something from my head.
The person will describe being on a table, which is generally metallic. They are unable to move.
And the beings were standing around me,
looking at me,
examining my body.
Now, when they're on the table, they describe operations which take place.
The next thing I remember, they have this thing in front of my eye, like a metal instrument that was kind of like shaped like an L, and it went all the way back down to here, though, in my throat.
As proof the operations have taken place, those who believe they were abducted often point to unexplainable scars, even implants.
My mother remembers me pointing out that I had a scar on my leg. She said it never bled.
The scar appeared simultaneously with Jesse's abduction experience at age 4 in 1956. Beneath the scar, Jesse could always feel a small object.
I remembered being taken into the craft, taken into one room. I was placed on a very cold, flat table. My brother was separated and he was taken into another room. They were doing something down to my legs. I could feel them poking and prodding around my legs.
I ran down the hill. The 3 of us ran down the hill. We thought we were running home. We went into this man in dark clothing, tall, dark eyes. Then there was a sensation of floating and then being on a table and having feelings of ice put on our legs and lights shining in our eyes, and that's all I remember. And there were 6 of them, and they all looked the same. Now, I just can't accept this.
Like a cliched saucer, you know, circular and very large.
Yeah. And do you remember being in it as well, Wendy?
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm. And just lying on a table with faces looking over me, and Scott saw the same figures, like hockey mask figures, if you can imagine a hockey mask, and nasty looking equipment.
It had a couple of tables in it. It was like one table laying down, a long, narrow one, and one up in the air, only on a hinge. I think I was laying on one. It was like they had Terry standing up against the other one. It was like he was tied there. He couldn't move. Or clamped in.
Did they at any time say anything to you?
It was like there was communication.
How does the communication take place?
Like a thought.
Did they tell you or communicate with you that you would not remember this, that it was secret?
Not then.
They did later?
Yeah.
Did you ever see at all what they looked like?
They were big. He was standing quite a ways above. Arm's length, maybe.
What sort of suits or things were they wearing?
Maybe a rubber-like.
Could you see their eyes?
Yeah. They were like holes, deep holes. The glaring of the eyes. It seemed like their eyes controlled our brain.
Okay, describe what happened during the examination.
I got very cold. Don't have much feeling left. It was like they put something numb on me.
How many kinds of tests or how many kinds of examinations took place?
They checked everything on my body.
Did you feel somebody was touching you?
Well,
with instruments or with hands?
With instruments.
Uh-huh.
Maybe like a little knife. A small one. When they put it in my nose, it felt like it was scraping it. I think they opened my head and examined my brain. I don't know, it's like they dissect like we dissect a frog.
They had large heads and big black eyes, and it was very fuzzy. I was almost passed out at that time.
And they floated you up onto the spacecraft, and then what happened?
They put me onto a table, and they showed me a long needle, and they put the edge of the needle into my navel.
I'm finding in my cases many chilling similarities. The person is taken against their will, taken into a craft of some kind, put on a table. The women begin to experience the gynecological examinations done by the aliens on them. They feel very violated. With the men, anal probes are inserted and sperm is taken. It's all done against their will, and they're really helpless to do anything about it.
The next thing I remember after the going up was being on a table, and that's the first time they did what like a gynecological exam on me.
For a 12-year-old kid?
Mm-hmm. And
no wonder that you were scared.
Yeah, it was a shock because I was pretty naive. I didn't really have any clue of how my body worked anyway, and then to have these things around me and they checked me out and they put something in me, and it was really traumatic at the time. I feel like it sort of took some of my innocence away at the time, and it bothered me.
They took me into a room. I was told to disrobe, and I was embarrassed. I didn't want to undress, and yet I couldn't stop. They told me to take my wedding rings off, which I did. And then they led me to a table and laid me down. I remember them telling me that I was either going to have a baby or that I was pregnant. I wasn't quite sure. But what they had done was remove a fetus from me and implanted another, which was really emotionally hard for me. They've gone in with needles through my abdomen. They have gone in through the vagina and taken out small, what look like fetuses that couldn't possibly survive.
Women say routinely that eggs are extracted from them, that this is something that is common. It's common for every woman who has ovaries intact. We don't really see a whole lot of exceptions to that. I'm sure there are exceptions to it, but it's extremely common. And harvesting eggs. All of these are drawings by abductees.
It's white. It's so white. It's like it's round. I can see Helen. She's on a board. It's shaped like a table, like a school table. There's something on the ceiling. It looks like operating something which will come down. My eyes, they're looking into my eyes. It feels like a burning sensation in my eye. They looked like grey people. I think more white than there was grey, like, and the big almond eyes, very big, and you can hardly see a nose, but you know a nose was there, and a mouth. And sometimes the mouth was not there. And other times, you knew there's sort of a line. In fact, sometimes you can see like a only tiny red line there.
He's touching my face, touching my hair now, looking at my heart. They're looking at my eyes.
What basically is happening is people are being examined medically. They're having toenails removed, they're having hair removed, they're having skin samples removed.
I was lying on a table on my back, and my head was placed in a kind of restraint, and I saw this instrument coming down toward my face. I was terrified, first of all. Secondly, when I realized what they were going to do with this pronged instrument, I couldn't believe it.
Beth claims she could feel the pressure of her eyeball being pulled free of the socket, and that it was extremely painful. Unconcerned, the aliens went about their business.
Something was done behind the eyeball, some procedure behind the eyeball that I could feel, but I couldn't see, obviously. The eyeball was then in some way reinserted or replaced in the socket.
I was pushed into a room that I describe as a large hospital ward. There were tiny little tables about 1.5 feet tall all through this hospital ward, and there were unconscious human beings laying on all of these tables, and there were these little short off-white beings, naked guys with big black eyes, doing things to these people on these tables.
I can then remember arriving in a room that had like a platform table in the center and being made to lay on this table. And I had various medical things done to me at that time. I had something placed actually into my head behind my ear that caused me a great deal of pain. I also had something placed up my nose, and at that point I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. I had various sort of needle things poked into me, and I was prodded.
By the aliens were doing all this?
By these little beings, yes. Little 3.5 feet tall beings, tan grey in colour, with very big eyes, big heads. And then later on there was a larger being, about 5 feet tall, slightly different colour, that came up and kept staring into my face and was showing me all these images and things. And I had something actually at one point moving around inside of my stomach, and at that point I can remember just feeling as though I wanted to die.
They brought me forward into a room which looked exactly, well, not exactly, but it's reminiscent of what a doctor's office would look like. It appeared to be a medical room. There was a table in there, and they led me over to the table. And somewhere in the process, I was disrobed, and they laid me upon the table and performed some kind of medical procedures. They appeared to be gynecological in nature. And after a time of performing these procedures, they finally got through with whatever they were doing. And then they got me on up from the table.
He rose up, and when he got to the end of the cloud, he passed out and woke up on an examining table. And that's the time in between. He didn't remember anything. Of course, when he first came back, he didn't really remember a whole lot of that either. That took time to develop the details by stressing his memory to get it.
First thing I remember looking at was this bar of lights flashing slowly above my head. Now, this is what the bar of lights look like. Laying on a table, and your head is up here, and you're looking up. You see blue, green, red, blue, green. Green, blue, red, green, blue. You know, back and forth. Flash, 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 flash. And it was doing this. And the slower this went, the more conscious I became. The more able to wake up and look around me. What I saw when I woke up, it's hard to really sometimes grasp, but it was like I thought in my mind there were doctors or I'd been hurt. I'd fallen when I remembered the train tracks. I didn't remember the object as much as I remembered falling into train tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember falling, and I thought, oh, I must have broken my back. Somebody must have found me, and I'm in a hospital. You know, and all these thoughts were racing through my heads until 3 people that were standing there turned and looked at me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had noticed that before they had turned, they were looking at this bar of lights flashing on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And they were looking at a box that seemed to be off to the side at my feet.
Uh-huh.
And the box was connected to the bed. You could tell it was connected by wires to the bed I was laying on, or the table, or whatever it was. And when they turned and looked at me, it was like all kinds of emotions just surged to the surface at once. Now, this is a sketch of what I believe I saw standing next to my bed, or a table, or whatever you want to call it.
In a cold room, on a metal table, with shadowy figures nearby.
Is there any part of your body where you feel that tingling more intensely than any other part, or is it all over?
It's just in my groin, like I fell asleep.
I could see my legs up because I could see the tops of my knees, but I had no feeling there whatsoever. But the fellow on the right was doing something down there because I could see him. I could see his head right here. I just can't imagine that they would sporadically just pick people up willy-nilly and take their sperm and perform these. I mean, how often do you have to do that?
What happens after I'm hit with the light is that I'm taken aboard a ship. Normally I'm placed on a table. And the beings kind of look at me, probe me, sometimes take sperm samples. Look in my eyes, my ears, that type of thing. And then after that, I'm usually taken into another room, and I'm literally shown events of the Earth. They've showed me future, what seems to me to be future cataclysmic events that where the Earth is heading.
What's up? They're taking me.
Where are you?
I'm laying on a table.
How old are you?
18, 19.
Want to express it more, the anger?
It's a trauma on 4 levels. It's a trauma because the thing itself is so traumatic, to be helpless, to be taken against your will and subjected to these intrusive rape-like procedures. It's traumatic because of the isolation that people feel. They can't talk about it. The parents will say, well, that's your dream again, or your nightmare. Thirdly, it is philosophically shocking to people's worldview. I mean, this is not supposed to be. In our worldview, this is beyond extraordinary. It's impossible. And then the fourth thing is that it can recur at any time. I mean, it's not like other traumas that are over when they're over. They can be taken again.
And 2 figures about my size came up, one on either side of me from behind. And they said, "Well, you come with us, Chris." All I saw was a ramp. It looked like a metallic ramp that entered a doorway. And they put me on this table and they clamped my skull into like a vise of some sort. I remember I just couldn't move. And I saw this contraption. It was metallic and they clamped it firm. I could not move. And they rammed something up the back of my head, and it hurt like the devil. I was screaming. And they packed me up and walked me out of the ship. And I'm running back home.
And they took me into this room, and the next thing I remembered under the hypnosis was being on a table. Some kind of examination table, and there was one of these creatures was on either side of me, and there was another one on the bottom, and they were examining me, and I felt like a polar bear, you know, like when our scientists go to the North Pole and they dart a polar bear and they were examining them and doing all these things, as you know, checking their teeth. That's what they were doing.
My husband and I had problems. We came close to a divorce over this until He woke up on a table being examined by 3 grays. This is something that we didn't ask for, we didn't want, and it's totally changed our lives.
Here is a sperm collection procedure. Here's a guy who's laying on one of these tables. You'll notice a curved room and a round, and this is a situation where sperm is being taken and he is comforted by an abductee, a non-alien, an abductee, which I found of no concern whatsoever when I saw this and when he told me about it. Later, I became interested in this. So they take sperm, we know that, all the time. In fact, Barney Hill in 1961 said that they had taken a sperm sample, but when a book was written about them in 1966, to our amazing luck, he refused to have that put in because it was so embarrassing. He didn't want people to know. And that was hugely important to us because nobody knew that this had happened to Barney, and people started describing it all the time, then nobody could be accused of picking it up from the Barney and Betty Hill story early on. See what I mean? It wasn't mentioned, but it's in the testimony.
It seemed as if I was carried up the ramp. My feet were banging against the ground as these small men I described came up to me and carried me from the car and through the woods and up this ramp and into this room where I opened my eyes. I saw a table. Betty described the table as being adequate for her to lie on, the room where she was in. And at this time, I do not know where Betty is. And apparently, I am more concerned for my own welfare to be concerned about Betty. But the table that I described was small, and obviously the difference in our heights could be the answer.
Well, how tall were these men?
I estimate, I said they were about as tall as Betty, but this would mean that they
What are you, 5'1"?
About 4.5 to 5 feet.
I'm 5 feet. 5 feet.
Yes, and I'm 5'8". So that the 3 inches difference was quite a difference. And I said that the table was too small. Where I, too, was given an examination, I'm very conscious about my teeth. I was very upset about, I only got as far as saying something went into my mouth, and I did not bother to tell the doctor, and he did not press this as to what was happening, but I can only think now that this would have been when my teeth would have been extracted. And
pulled out.
Pulled out. Yeah, I should have said pulled out because they're dentures. Yes, and so they weren't extracted, they had been. But I go on to explain that the kind of examination that I had been given is a scraping of the skin, and I had been turned over. They were interested in body openings, and a cup-like object was placed against my genitals. And I was reluctant to talk about that until Mr. Fuller was able to word it for me by saying lower abdomen. And this would have been the extent of the examination.
And then there's, sort of in the middle of the room is a table. Some kind of a table. It's not up very high, about the same height as a desk. So I lie down on the table, on my back, and he brings over this how can I describe it? They're like needles. There's a whole cluster of needles, and each needle has a wire running from it. So then they roll me over on my back. And the examiner has a long needle in his hand. And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it. And he said, just a simple test, it won't hurt me. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. It's just a simple test. And I told him, no, it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And he said, no, it won't hurt. And he sticks a needle into my navel. And I'm crying, and I tell him it's hurting, take it out. And then the leader, he goes over and he puts his hand, runs his hand in front of my eyes. And he says, I'll be all right. I won't feel it. And all the pain goes away.
Louise Smith ultimately remembered waking up on what seemed to be an operating table with strange creatures peering down at her.
They were about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, and they wore a dark, tight-fitted suit and a hood. The hood was tight-fitted also, you know. The only thing visible was the eyes. They were very huge and pointed more to the temple, not straight across like how our eyes would be. There was an odor. It was almost like a mold. Have you ever smelled a refrigerator that's been fastened up that with no electric for a long time, you know? And you open that door and you get this kind of moldy smell. I smell that. And I have never been asked this question, but now is an opportunity to bring this out also. The odor itself, I smelled stronger when the beings were near me. And when they looked at me, we did not talk verbally like we're talking now. It was a telepathy type thing. And I would tell myself I'm not going to look at them, but there was no way I could resist, you know. And then at one point, they poured a liquid over my entire body, and I thought I was going to die because I could not breathe. I could not breathe, and it was so hot, you know. So then, when they pulled it off, it was like ripping a piece of tape, you know, from the body and the skin. And what that was for, other than I get so frightened, I think maybe they were making a mold, you know.
And I could just barely make out the forms of what I thought were doctors, but then my vision cleared and I could see these aliens standing close. And it just completely freaked me out. I mean, I was already scared about the way I felt, but I just completely lost my mind with fear.
Were you, describe what you were on, if you can. Were you on a slat?
I was lying on my back, and I was close enough to the ceiling before I even looked over and saw them. I figured I was on some kind of a gurney or a raised operating table, and I thought, you know, that I'd been hurt somehow and taken to the hospital. But then when I finally focused on what I thought were medical people, it was these aliens, and I just flipped out.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people think, oh, I would stay calm. Ask good questions.
Who thinks that? Not me.
You know, but you have to understand that, you know, the pain I was feeling, the feeling of something mortally wrong inside, but moreover, the most important feeling was that I felt like I couldn't get enough air. The feeling of suffocation. There's a scene in the movie of a membrane.
Yes.
When the actor's laying on the table and aliens are surrounding him, and he's struggling to scream through this membrane, struggling to breathe through it. That didn't actually happen, but I think in that case it does a better job of explaining the source of my panic, or at least the chief source. That, you know, that feeling of suffocation combined with the feeling of weakness, like you can't move when you need to move quickly. To get away. And so, you know, suddenly realizing where I was gave me a shot of adrenaline, a burst of strength to actually sort of lash out at them. It was, you know, pretty weak. And it was more of a push than a hit. And I rolled away in the opposite direction. This device they had lying across my chest fell off and hit the floor, but I just mainly kept my eyes on them as I backed away or stumbled backwards. And when I bumped up against this shelf behind me, I just looked real quick to see what I'd run into, and there was some things there, and I just grabbed the biggest thing there and started flailing in their direction. And that stopped their approach.
All right. Two things to ask. One, the movie depicted a lack of gravity. You said something fell and hit the floor, so obviously there was some gravity.
Yeah, there was gravity. There was no weightlessness.
Okay.
And is actually, if anything, it might have been slightly heavy gravity.
Really?
To explain that feeling of weakness, although just the feeling of injury. I really think that whatever happened with that blast of energy from the craft, it did so much damage that when I came to at that point, whatever efforts had been made to revive me were not complete.